For a ship whose first hints at life were essentially a meme, the 400i jumped into game recently, seemingly out of nowhere. This is supposedly a ship that bridges the gap between the single-seater 300 series and the multi-crew 600 series. But is that a gap that needed bridging? I'm Forrester, and in this video I try to answer that question by spending some time reviewing the currently flyable Origin 400i, variously described as a touring and pathfinding ship. For those of you who've seen other ship reviews on this channel, the format will be familiar. This video is split into 5 sections, starting with a ship tour, assessing combat performance, reviewing handling and visibility, looking at the operating costs before finally summarising. I've included timestamps in the video description in case you want to skip ahead. And if you're one of the 3/4 of people watching who isn't yet subscribed to the channel, you may choose to subscribe to be notified of future videos as they go live. On the nose landing gear of the 400i are 2 buttons. One deploys the garage right at the front of the ship, and the second deploys a ramp which leads up into the main body of the 400i. The so-named garage at the front of the ship has a lift which goes up and down and is really designed for the Origin proprietary speeder bike. Looking back through the ship, the gravity generator is visible between the main body of the 400i and the garage. There isn't a huge amount of space in this front section, and it does feel like it could have been used better. As we take the lift back down and go up the ramp into the first section of the 400i, we'll start by pointing out that this ship has 2 decks, and we're entering into the lower deck or technical deck. Looking forward to the front of the ship, you can see just beyond the gravity generator is that garage. On the right or starboard side there are 4 cupboards. The first is a weapons rack, and the rear 3 are for armour suits. On the left or port side is an airlock/docking clamp. Whilst currently inoperational, in the future this may add additional functionality to the 400i. Moving rearwards through the ship on this technical deck, we enter into this engineering section. The styling in here is particularly nice. There are 2 glass rooms, one on each side, and each of these rooms houses component access for future. Each of the rooms has its own glass door with its own control module, and each of the components also have their own doors with toggle switches. This fits in really well with the Origin stylings. There's an elevator to lead up a deck, as well as a set of ladders to lead up a deck. And then moving to the rear of the lower technical deck, we enter into the cargo bay. There are a few escape pods here, each with their own button, as well as additional component access. And finally, there is the cargo storage at the back. This does deploy, as with many other ships, which allows for the loading or unloading of small vehicles. We'll now head to the upper deck or habitation deck. As discussed, there is an elevator, but there's also a ladder which offers an additional option. Right at the front of the upper deck is the bridge. There's the pilot seat right at the front of the ship, as well as 2 support seats. Each of these seats does have an MFD display, as well as remote access to the remote turrets. Immediately behind the bridge, there is a small bathroom. Once again, everything deploys out in a nice, stylish Origin fashion. Moving further back on the habitation deck, we have the captain's quarters. This is on the left or port side. There's a seat, some storage, as well as a bed for use by the captain. There's a lot of attention to detail in these rooms, and the Origin styling really does come through. Opposite the captain's quarters is the crew space. There are another 2 beds, as well as another 2 cupboards. And then at the back of the habitation deck is the crew space. There's a drinking and bar area, an interactive holomap, and then a seating area for the crew. From a combat perspective, the 400i has 3 different weapons stations. Firstly, the pilot controls 2 gimbaled size 3 weapons, by default Panther repeaters. And there are 2 remote turrets, both at the rear of the ship and both armed with dual size 3 Panthers too. The lower turret has the better field of fire, as it's just about able to align with the pilot's line of sight. The upper turret is obstructed by the hump at the top of the ship, so can't fire directly forward. That means that at best you'll have 2/3 of your firepower shooting at any one target. The Panthers are nice enough as stock, and with all of them being gimbaled or on a turret, they have a good range of motion, and the capacitor stores are also fairly generous, able to continue firing for a while. That means that the 400i performs okay in a combat scenario, but not to the level of a specialised combat ship or some of the other ships at this price point. She does carry a generous armament of 16 size 2 and 16 size 1 missiles to help deal with smaller threats, which is a welcome boost to the combat potential of this ship. And defensively, the 400i carries a size 3 shield generator, which is actually a big improvement on some of the smaller combat ships and puts it on a par with the Constellation. The canopy in the 400i is what you might expect from Origin, making great use of glass all around to give good peripheral vision, as well as out to the front. Similarly to the 890 Jump, the front of the 400i sprawls out beneath the pilot's line of sight, which can make it a little tough to see below. Before we explore the handling qualities of the 400i, we'll talk about how fast it can go in a straight line. At 1,250 meters per second, the top speed of the 400i is substantial, especially for a ship of this size, which makes it great for outrunning many opponents if required. That's particularly helpful as the 2 gun turrets at the back of the ship can both shoot rearwards, which makes it a great option to simply run away and let the rear turrets engage anybody trying to follow you. The SCM speed of the 400i is 185 meters per second, which is very high when compared to the likes of the Constellation. And herein lies the problem. Although that's where the SCM limiter defaults, that's too fast to be true SCM speed for the 400i. Although it accelerates well, it doesn't have good braking performance, so even at SCM speeds, the 400i is very sluggish when undertaking any kind of manoeuvre. I'd even go so far as to say it's worth lowering the SCM limiter to about 150 to get a more realistic SCM type performance. Thankfully, as it is supposedly billed as an exploration/touring ship, the quantum stores on the 400i are considerable, meaning it can easily cross the Stanton system in a single hop. The stock drive is on the slow side however, so swap that out to an XL1 to help cut down travel times. Across refuel, rearm and repair, you might reasonably expect the maintenance costs for the 400i to come in at a few thousand Alpha UEC when you do stop by port. That's fairly reasonable for a ship at this size point. The 400i, theoretically at least, also has a few options available for money making. Although it's not the most pleasant experience, combat is a possibility, especially if you have a couple of gunners to deal with enemies that inevitably get behind you. With 42 SCU of cargo storage, although you're not going to make any earth-shattering profits, you can at least try your hand at trading with the 400i. And with ample internal space, all manner of contracts that require physical storage are also a possibility with the 400i. Ultimately, you'll probably be covering your costs for the most part, rather than making any huge sums of money. By way of loadout changes to consider, my personal recommendation would be to swap out the quantum drive for an XL1 and to swap out the shield generator for an FR86. Otherwise, most of the stock components seem to do just fine. In terms of the ship itself, well, there are a few things on my gripe list. Firstly, the garage at the front feels largely pointless. Yes, it'll fit the proprietary Origin speeder bike, but you actually have to have a good reason to use the bike, which, in my experience, is incredibly rarely. That space could be much better used. Likewise, the inclusion of the cargo bay is almost great, but it ends up being ever so slightly too small to load up the ground vehicles that you want to, and it could easily have been bigger. And don't get me started on that front landing gear strut. If it blended seamlessly into the front of the ship, creating a nice sleek line, it would look fantastic, but it just looks out of place on an Origin ship. That said, the internals are much more Origin style and look truly fantastic. It's also relatively versatile in that it can do lots of different types of mission in-game. It's also fairly easy to land, and the internal layout is sensible for the crew to make their way around. But here's the rub. At $250 pledge price and no in-game price, the Constellation Andromeda is a much better buy. The Constellation has twice as much cargo capacity, can load more ground vehicles, has a snub fighter and more powerful weapons for around the same price. Yes, it doesn't have the same sleek Origin stylings, but it does pretty much everything better than the 400i. Or the Mercury Star Runner, also twice the cargo storage capacity, faster, easier to fly, arguably more combat effective since the turrets can more readily engage the same target. Well, for me, and I say this with a heavy heart as an Origin fan, it's just too expensive for what you get. But do you agree? I know a few people picked up the 400i, so it would be really interested to know if you think I've been unfair on this ship. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button as it helps me to know what you're finding most helpful. Otherwise, as always, thank you for watching.